You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, an affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I am your host, Skyler Timmons, wearing my Jokic jersey, and joined here once again, not wearing a Jokic jersey, it's Evan Lang.
To be fair, I could be wearing a Jokic jersey, but I am not. Perhaps I should be.
It's not that you can't, it's that you just aren't.
That is true. I'm also not wearing a hat.
Neither am I. But fun stuff. And we have a ton to talk about in this episode that we'll get to. But first, what the heck? Let's keep the tradition going. A quick roundabout on the Denver sports scene. One of the big ones, Evan, a big hit. Currently, as of recording, the Broncos are about to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Hooray! But a big hit for the Broncos this week, Evan, where J.K. Dobbins, their running back, who's been having a good year, he's out for the season with a foot injury and a huge blow. So it looks like the rookie is going to have to step it up in the halfback.
Yeah, it's really tough losing J.K. Dobbins. And I feel so bad for him at this point because, it's never, for J.K. Dobbins, it's never like your typical, he's just really injury prone of, he's got a hamstring. It's an ankle. It's always something catastrophic and season ending. And it's got to be so miserable to have. You know, he was on pace for having a very good season, and now I think they were calling it a Liz Frank injury, one of those common foot injuries, requires surgery. His season's now over. He's a free agent at the end of the year, and that makes it even tougher for this Broncos offense, who has not been good against a pretty good Chiefs defense. It's going to be tough, and it's going to be, I think, a big deal for Sean Payton to actually stick to trying to have some sort of semblance of a run game, getting the ball to RJ Harvey, getting the ball to really anyone to take that pressure off of Bo Nix.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there, but Broncos, hey, they still got 8 wins, so we'll see what happens with that. But speaking of injuries, another big one for our Denver Nuggets, Christian Braun suffered an ankle injury, a sprain injury. He'll be out for, I think, 6 weeks. Essentially, so about a month or so. That's a tough blow, but luckily, Evan, this is why the Nuggets built a bench and have some depth, because their win on Saturday, well, you couldn't tell that Christian Braun wasn't there.
I think early in the game, you could definitely tell they were missing CB, especially in terms of his defense that he brings to the table, but especially later in the game. And you also had Cam Johnson out too. And Cam Johnson, who's really struggled to find any rhythm so far early in the season. But you had both of them out. You had Peyton Watson and Tim Hardaway Jr. both start. And they both played their roles very well. Tim Hardaway Jr. especially was excellent on Saturday.
Put up a season high in points.
And so now you've got the Nuggets with 7 wins in a row. And the bench still playing well, despite the shakeup of having to shift some guys onto the starting lineup. Jonas Valanciunas continues to be pretty good. We've got a team with actual depth now. And going into Minnesota, taking on the Timberwolves, it's been a pretty big rivalry game set as of the last couple years. And running away with it in the fourth quarter and really just, putting down an important win shows that, no team stays healthy for the entire season. And for the Nuggets, it shows that they now have the depth to withstand those kind of injuries and still keep Jokic off the floor for a significant amount of time. They were talking about it the other day, and I looked it up to see where they were right. Minutes-wise, Jokic has essentially a full game's worth of rest so far this season that he normally wouldn't have, because the team's got actual depth, so he doesn't have to be, take him out. Oh no, we immediately blew the game. Put him back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it helps that Jokic he still is finding ways to be better every year and doing unimaginable things, and he's still playing like the Joker. Good stuff. for him. So yeah, Nuggets keep on rolling. So do our Colorado Avalanche, who, yeah, they're getting some people back. Val Nichushkin is out for a period of time with an injury, but still, no, you look at the Avalanche, still a good squad, and we can finally relax. Gabe Landeskog finally got his first regular season goal in many years,
And
and it
he
wasn't
got
overturned.
and he got his second as well, but it was so bad because he got his first goal, and then in one of the games right after that he had a goal and it got overturned, and it's like, so Landeskog could have had at that point 4 goals on the season, 3 of which got overturned by review. But it's been nice to see the Avs trucking along, especially Sam Girard back in the lineup, which is nice to see. Sammy G always important for the Avs, but the guy who's really stepped up this year is the young gun Gavin Brindley, who they put on the second line in place of Val Nichushkin in this last game, and he played great.
Yeah, had a game-winning goal.
Yeah, and then you've got Scott Wedgwood, who the Avs just extended on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal, so he will be back next year, playing very well as Mackenzie Blackwood. He's not been bad, but he's still very clearly shaking off the rust as he missed significant time, both in training camp and in the regular season. And Jared Bednar was basically like, I hate to say it, but it's a problem that Blackwood's not ready, and I got to ride the hot hand. So we need Scott Wedgwood, and Wedge has been fantastic, and it's definitely well deserved because Ilya Nabkov just probably not ready with some of the struggles that we're seeing from him overseas, and having Wedgwood as that security blanket for another year, I think is going to be fantastic.
Yeah. So, and the Avs keep on rolling. Is it still only one loss in regulation?
Only one loss in regulation.
Heck yeah.
Despite that, though, the Dallas Stars are still hot on their heels.
Yeah, but anyway, Marty Necas, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, all those fellas doing their same old things, and it's fun. It's fun watching hockey and watching the Nuggets. Good times in Denver sports across the board. But even more important, the topic of our podcast, the Rockies' new president of baseball operations. We talked a little bit about Paul DePodesta last week and just kind of reactions to that hiring. Since then, we've had a week of the general manager meetings, the GM meetings in Las Vegas. We finally got to hear from Paul DePodesta. Evan, we got his, our first interaction with the media, and then he had his introductory press conference at Coors Field this past Thursday. And so we've kind of gotten a week of DePodesta kind of quotes and kind of impressions and some slight ideas of who it is that is now in the Rockies organization at the head, and some clarity. But just kind of on the surface level, and we'll dive into it. Evan, just what was your takeaway from the week of Paul DePodesta, having seen interviews and heard from him now? What has been your takeaways or impressions of him thus far?
I think one of the biggest takeaways, just on a surface level, Skyler, something that we've talked about extensively now, is how different he is in terms of just overall media savviness, being able to talk to people. He seems friendly. He seems approachable. Compare that to Bill Schmidt, who, when we heard from him, he didn't really, not particularly well spoken, didn't really have a lot of energy to him. And Jeff Bridich, who, putting it bluntly, was a notorious jerk to pretty much everybody. And you compare that to Paul DePodesta, who he's a different kind of that, like, Ivy League educated. Skylar, I think you said something to the effect of, Jeff Bridich was Ivy League educated, who wanted everybody to know about it, despite the fact that he didn't work that hard to get there.
His dad made a big donation to the school board and they let him in.
Versus, DePodesta comes across as a guy who has worked really hard to get where he is and isn't trying to show off how smart he is, but it does come across that he's quite clever. And that's really, really been apparent to me when he's talked to the media, both at the GM meetings and in his introductory press conference.
Yeah, and reading other interviews, he's well respected by his peers across the league. He's talked about the friends that he has around the league in different front offices, and they couldn't be happier that he's gonna get to face this challenge. Like, if anybody can solve it, it's him. And so he's well respected across the league, and No, you see some of the interviews and quotes that came out, highly respected. Like they have nothing but faith in him. Like, yeah, that's a pretty good hire. Like he can do it. He can figure it out. He's smart.
Yeah.
And so I think that bodes well because it's felt like, no, we've heard over the last two GMs, especially, of just how hard it was to, connect with the Rockies, to communicate with them. And it was hard to do business with them in that respect because, well, honestly, they didn't know what they were doing and they weren't a very well respected organization, just how they treated everybody else.
Yeah. Just
And so,
very, very difficult to work with was their reputation. And for several different reasons, I think you had the brightest factor of he was hard to work with because he always thought he knew best. And then you had Schmidt, who was hard to work with because, he didn't really know what he was doing. And you don't really get that feeling with DePodesta. And one of the things that we discussed at length is, talking about the amount of time he's spent out of baseball, the last 10 years or so with the Cleveland Browns. And, is he caught up on Major League Baseball? Is he caught up on baseball analytics? And for a lot of what the baseball industry is saying is that if he's not caught up, he will be soon, but that there's no real reason to believe he's not going to be able to come in and know what he is doing and be ready to go.
yeah, because I think it was even him saying, or other peers are saying it, like baseball is his first love. Like the time with the Browns and like football, that was just another challenge for him. And we'll touch on that in a second because that kind of seems to be a running theme for him. But that football was kind of a sidetrack. But that baseball is really where his heart lies, that love. And so he, stayed up, knew about the trends of the sport and things that were happening, kept tabs on it, and obviously kept in touch with baseball people who could keep him up to date and he could ask him things and all that stuff. But now that he's able to come back, he's working from behind, but he can catch up because he's working from scratch with the Rockies anyway. The Rockies are behind; they need to catch up anyway, so they'll do it together. But there's that confidence in him that he's well spoken. He does show some confidence, which everything, and we'll talk about that in a later segment on that. With need to do more than just words, but he's got that confidence about him. Like I said, well spoken to the media. Where it is refreshing, where he can sell this product to the fans that hey, change is coming, and that's refreshing to see. Just this upbeat person who's like excited to be a Rocky. I think we've talked about that before, Evan. Where it's nice when somebody wants to come here, and we're not just treated like the laughing stock, like the desolate wasteland. But like, no, I'm excited to be here with the Rockies.
Yeah. And, we, as much as we joke about, oh, he wants to be here, I think it's especially worth mentioning when it's someone coming from outside the organization who
Yeah,
has, outside of being friends with Thad Levine, no real connection to the Rockies organization. And Skyler, I like what you mentioned. They're talking about wanting to sell the product that is the Colorado Rockies. That's been a consistent theme with DePodesta's early media work, is talking about rebuilding the team's reputation, talking about getting the fans back, building up the brand, finding a culture, finding an identity for the Rockies, something that they have really been lacking over the last 7+ seasons of trying to figure out who are the Colorado Rockies? What kind of baseball do they play? What is
yeah,
their fan base? And trying to bring that back because, we all know Coors Field sells well. It's packed to the gills with visiting fans and things like that who want to watch their team play. But there's a real feeling from DePodesta in what he is saying is, well, we've got to get the Rockies fans back. And
yeah,
he's mentioned a couple things. He's mentioned, the Rocktober run and the atmosphere that this ballpark, that this team can have when they're playing good baseball. And that's something that, I mentioned it when the Mariners were playing, in the World Series and in the ALCS, that kind of atmosphere that, we've had before and need to get back, of when you've got a fan base that is invested in the team and not just there for a nice day out at the ballpark or there to see the visiting team play. You have such a better atmosphere and such a better day-to-day baseball experience.
yeah. And that's kind of what we talked about last week too, where he's got to do a lot of selling to get fans on board with it. And I think he's got off to a good start with it all and saying the right things, starting to do things. And I think that's the important part of it all because the team is has been a laughing stock and of such a big part of it's not just about building a winning baseball team. That's a big part of it. But it is about building that relationship for the fans, like what he said at the GM meetings. And I know some people might have taken, some pause and exception to him saying, no, we're in this about building salient moments for fans. And you do that by winning. But, add a context like, oh, he's just here about making moments for fans. But at the end of the day, that's a big part of the sports industry. This is an entertainment product. You want it to be entertaining and create these memorable moments. The way you do that is by winning ball games.
Yeah. And I'm sorry for all the people who are taking umbrage with that statement of wanting to build salient moments, because over the last 7 years, we haven't really had any of those. Like,
yeah,
a very small handful of interesting moments since the 2019 season. But honestly, most of those moments have been people leaving. Like, what's the biggest one?
yeah,
It was Charlie Blackmon's curtain call.
yeah. And there's like those little tiny moments like, oh, Ryan McMahon's grand slam on opening day. But those are like a blink. Those are in the moment. Nobody's going to be remembering that 3 years from now. Like, oh, remember when Ryan McMahon hit that grand slam on opening day? That was awesome. Oh, they lost over 100 games that season? Oh, well.
Yeah. What was the big moment of the 2025 baseball season? It was when the Rockies went down by 9 runs in the first inning and then managed to come back and win
Yeah.
17-16.
Yeah. And so it's I understand that aspect of like, yes, it's about building that relationship in these moments for fans to care about the team and build that atmosphere. And it's going to come from wins. Like it goes hand in hand because when you're losing a bunch, those aren't salient moments. I'm not going to remember when Jimmy Herget came in and struck out the side, but the team lost 8-5. Okay, they still lost. So those moments come from winning, and I think he understands that, and that's kind of what he was getting at. Of you make those moments by winning, and it goes back to building that identity and culture, like you said, of who are the Rockies, what brand of baseball do we play, and how can we be successful in doing that.
Yeah. And I think that's hugely important. And, it's going to be a process. The Rockies are still very likely to be quite terrible in 2026. Like, there's no real way around that. Maybe just by, regressing to the average, they will be slightly less awful in terms of overall record, because it's very hard to be consistently so bad that you're making history every day. Like, I think a lot of people learned in 2025 season just how hard it is to set the all-time record for regular season losses.
Yeah.
Because despite the fact that the Rockies were in the news almost every day for being awful, they still didn't set the all-time record. And, the Rockies are going to be bad next year. But that's not really what matters right now.
Mm-hmm.
More so than anything, it's about putting the pieces into motion to get this rebuild off on the right foot.
Yeah. And we'll start talking about more of that and some other impressions from comments that he's made, and more about the press conference and what role does Dick Monfort play in all this when we come back here on Affected by Altitude. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. Skyler and Evan talking Paul DePodesta, his deep PDP's big first week with the Rockies, getting in front of cameras and reporters, talking to everything, talking to the GM meetings, and talking in front of the press at Coors Field. And Evan, some that we'll get into, we can just kind of spitball and go from there. Has there been anything that's really stuck out to you from his comments that Paul DePodesta said throughout the week that has really stuck out to you, and kind of gives you a better idea of what he's going to try to do with the Rockies?
One that I found really interesting, and this has been mentioned in a few different places. Most recently, I heard Patrick Saunders talking about it on Altitude Sports Radio with Kreckman and Lindahl a couple days ago, is him talking about everything that he has learned since He was the GM of the Dodgers, and before
Mm-hmm.
that, the assistant GM with the Moneyball Oakland A's. And that is, how important analytics are. But what's more important is being a good overall team builder. Is
Yeah.
that, yes, you can put all these analytics together, you can do this, you can do that, but ultimately where you need to excel is building the team overall. It's
Yeah.
not just about one thing or another thing. It's a big picture, and that's something that he wants to focus on. And that's a very Rockies thing right now. Is the Rockies need to be in big picture mode. It can't just be little itty bitty bits here and there. Oh, we're going to look here. Oh, we're going to look there. It's everything.
Yeah.
Every single part of the Rockies needs to be reevaluated and potentially deconstructed or rebuilt. And that's where DePodesta is going to come in terms of team building.
Yeah. And when he talked about his experience with the Los Angeles Dodgers, his 2 years, and overall won, but they had that losing season and a bunch of mess behind the scenes. And there's some blaming, oh, he couldn't find the right manager, had to keep going through managers, and just overall the team wasn't that good. And then the Frank McCourt, all that garbage behind the scenes there. But then for him to take those lessons and learning from failure, like you're saying, it wasn't just about building the best 25-man roster, 26-man roster of the Dodgers. He failed it's an organizational thing. It's everything from top to bottom that has to be working in unison when you're in charge of the front office. It's not just about building this one good team. It's doing the whole system, an identity and culture and a process thing. Evan, is the big thing that's kept coming up since that day one is his desire to set that identity and culture and just process and just how the Rockies operate as a whole organization, not just as the team at 20th and Blake, but how are they operating down in Fresno, in Spokane, in Hartford, in Albuquerque? How's the front office doing things to help them, the coaching? More just unified vision throughout the organization and not as, kind of segmented like it would, these last several years.
Yeah. And another thing that he's mentioned as part of this is recognizing that he needs to be more of a people person, that the interpersonal relationships are also important when it comes to this team building. And we discussed this a little in the first half of that was not a part of the game that Bill Schmidt or Jeff Bridich did well at. It's not something the Rockies have really done well at all. You've got Dick Monfort, who's very loyal to his guys internally. But as we've mentioned before, you've got all these other teams coming out and going, man, the Rockies are so weird to work with. It's so difficult to pin down what it is they want or what it is they're doing. And DePodesta has been interesting because when he was with the Cleveland Browns, he wasn't operating in Cleveland. He was largely working remotely from his home in California. And we have learned over the last week that this is not going to be the case for his tenure with the Rockies, that he is going to be operating at 20th and Blake. He will be here in Colorado doing the work. And I think that's a really interesting development compared to how he's done things in the past.
Yeah, and it makes more sense, like with a baseball team, with games every day. Like there's no where's football. Yeah, you can just commute from California to Cleveland once a week, for game day type thing. But yeah, for him to be like, no, I'm going to be here, and we're figuring out with the kids what's best for them, but I'm going to be here, uh, in Denver to do the work that that he's committing. Yeah, I'm here for the long haul. Now, how long is he going to be here? Who knows? No, it's we know it's going to take a process. Is he going to get to just realize his vision and try out this full process and whatnot? But I think that's a big thing, Evan, is making that connection, wanting to be here, wanting to come and just be hands on in that aspect is huge. And you need that out of your president of baseball ops. He can't be aloof. Like, no, he needs to be here. Oh, no, roll his sleeves up and get in the muck. And I think part of that too is just kind of that idea that he's bringing out of making it a collaborative team effort in the front office. Where it's of course working with Walker and Dick, but also everybody that's already there in the front office. He kept talking about I want to get to know everybody and just know everything and collaborate. Pick their brains. What has worked? What hasn't worked? What ideas do you have? and just bring this this melting pot of ideas to try and solve this thing, which I think is huge. Like, if he can foster an environment where everybody feels like their opinion is valid, because what have we heard in the past when maybe some research and development people that have been hired, oh, I have a different idea of what I'm supposed to be doing. Oh, never mind, I'm fired. Hopefully then, a Brian Jones, he has a more of a voice now than he did a month ago, type of thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a whole bunch. And this is one of, I think, at least for now, ways that Dick Monfort's loyalty has actually kind of worked out just a little bit, is that some of the people who are still here, Danny Montgomery and Chris Forbes, Jesse Stender, people, especially guys like Danny Montgomery, though, guys who have been here for a really long time, you now have access to them to pick their brain on a friendly face-to-face basis, because they haven't been fired or anything, like they're still there, and go through the team's history of what have we tried, what worked, what didn't, what is your insight on this that I can take away from this. Sort of, you have access to the entirety of Rockies baseball in their entire history in one building. Some guys who have been there a really long time, some guys who haven't been there that long. And like you said, that was part of what DePodesta said he wanted to do, was take the time to get to know everybody, what they do, what they think, and start formulating a battle plan from there as part of a collaborative effort.
And I think that was always the problem we had is, everybody that was there had been there forever, but it was always, you just need somebody from the outside to come in, and head up the operation. You can keep those people that have been there because they have an understanding of it, but now maybe perhaps they get different tools and resources because somebody from the outside has come in to kind of foster that, and you don't have somebody like Bill Schmidt who's been a scout for so long. Like, nope, this is how we're going to do it. Baseball was done this way in the 90s. That's how we're going to do it in 2025. Or even like a manager in Bud Black. So this is how we played baseball in the 80s. This is how we're going to play it in 2025. This is the right way to play. And so it's building those relationships and fostering that maybe healthier work environment. It's more collaborative. Like, he still has final say on a lot of things, and he'll bring in some outside people as needed. But his solution isn't just going to be, we're going to throw a bunch of money and hire a ton of people.
Yeah.
Like, maybe all of us want him to, but like, no, we're going to spend where we need to and bring in people as needed and work with what we've got.
Yeah. And for that to happen, you need the pushback that DePodesta and the way he wants to do things is. It's more of a natural, less aggressive pushback, but it is pushback against the way that Dick Monfort has historically run this team. His thinking of, we're the only ones who can figure it out. Any outside ideas aren't going to work, or we've already tried it, or they're not worth trying. And so we need to just keep doing things the way that we've been doing them, and we'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah.
Is ultimately, that's what DePodesta is standing against.
Yeah, and no, it felt like Dick Monfort really was meddling more and more inside of this interview process of the search, and that's probably still the case, because why would you make offers to some guys and some reports saying he pulled out because of family reasons, not because of the front office control type stuff. Who knows? It could be both type things, but it definitely felt like Dick Monfort probably did have a hand in kind of muddling the waters, especially with the front office overhaul type stuff. And DePodesta, okay, yeah, he's going to work with what they have, and that probably is a good thing for Dick. But I think Walker has had his influence here of he's going to be that buffer between his dad and DePodesta. He's going to be that buffer. He is essentially the club. No, he is the team president. So he's the club president, or will be executive vice president, all that stuff. But he's going to be that buffer overseeing the whole baseball operation while his dad pulls back and unfortunately focuses on the negotiations for the labor CBA 2027. Because I'm sure that's going to work out really well for everybody all involved.
Worked out so well the last time.
That's true. But so Dick is taking a step back because so he can devote time to the labor negotiation stuff. But he's taking that step back and leaving it to Walker to try and handle all this.
Yeah.
And
What's really interesting is I go back to the Patrick Saunders on Kreckman and Lindahl earlier last week. And the question has been, how involved is Dick Monfort? Is this a Dick Monfort hire or a Walker Monfort hire? And what he was saying, and what I ultimately agree with, is while Dick Monfort is the ultimate decision maker, he's the guy who signs the checks. He's got to sign off on everything. This is a Walker Monfort hire. He was largely in charge of the search. And a big thing about the reason why he got this position is, yes, he agreed to to conditions that the Monforts may have in terms of how this team is going to be run, but that he wouldn't take the position if he wasn't going to have any chance. Like, just from what we know about Paul DePodesta, he would not take this position if he was not going to have the ability to at least somewhat build things his way. So yes, he's willing to work with some of the conditions that the Monforts might set, that ultimately he is going to have more freedom than you would initially anticipate. Because, when you look at Paul DePodesta, you've got a guy who he impressed the team with how smart he is, how sharp he is. He's clever. He knows how to think outside the box and do things ways the Rockies haven't done or haven't thought of. And when you hire a guy like that, you've got to give him at least some autonomy.
yeah, you got
And
to let him run on the leash.
And it's really tough because we know that is not generally the Dick Monfort way of doing things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the more that we have seen this week, and we'll talk about this, I guess now, is especially culminating in that introductory presser at Coors Field on Thursday, is that it really does seem like if Dick Monfort is not willing to take a step back, they are kind of pushing him to take a step back. He said so as much in the presser that, maybe jokingly he said it, but he still said it, is that he feels like he's being pushed out by Walker and by Paul DePodesta and by the other people in the organization. And ultimately, that's what's needed to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think his brother Charlie was there, and I'm sure Charlie was in on the decision too, because he's in as much of it as as Dick is in the ownership and everything. But yeah, maybe a 2-against-1 of now we need to hire this guy and let him do his thing. Dick can still sit back. That's what you do. Now, as the CEO, you hire people underneath you to do the work, and you just kind of the big decisions. Yeah, you'd have to have the final say, but you're not the one coming. You shouldn't be the one coming forward like, oh, we should sign Chris Bryant. We need that. Like, no, we don't need that. We need to take
Ian
that money.
Desmond should play first base and make $70 million.
Yeah. Hey, he only played 3 seasons, so we got 2 of those years for free.
What a steal.
Yeah. But, him taking that step back now. Okay, yeah. You'll still be involved on if the Rockies want to do something big, some big move and a big money move for a free agent signing. Yeah, of course, because it's money coming from the owners. But him to take that step back and realize, okay, Walker can handle this. Walker coming up to saying, I can handle this. And him be like, you know what? Okay. No, that's what this team needs. He can be involved as much as he wants, but he shouldn't have decision-making power of like just day-to-day things of, no, we can't trade Ryan McMahon. He's my favorite player. No,
Yeah.
we need to trade Ryan McMahon because he was at his most valuable last year. Instead, yeah, we got some good prospects from the Yankees this year, but who knows what we could have gotten last year when he was an all-star.
Yeah, especially when it's been hard over the last few seasons for members of the media to actually get anything out of Dick Monfort in terms of visibility.
Yeah.
But we have not seen that so far from Walker and Paul DePodesta. And, is there more that I want them to do? Of course. 100%. But it's at least a start of we have now two guys much more willing to get in front of the camera and talk about what is going on. I think a big change in that I've noticed and other people have noticed, who wrote the letter to the season ticket holders this year? It was Walker Monfort. And that's a big change because it's almost always Dick Monfort's got some sort of involvement, or he has the manager write part of it, or something like that. And now we've got the letter from Walker, and you've got Walker coming out and doing press conferences and talking to people, giving little sound bites, doing different things. And now you've got Paul DePodesta, who I've already mentioned, seems very media savvy.
Yeah. And no, that works well. That's a good tandem because then, the hierarchy, it makes the hierarchy a little bit easier, streamlined because, okay, Dick Monfort's at the top, but he's not there. But there's the buffer of Walker who's overseeing the whole organization, the operation. He's got DePodesta under him, who reports to him. Walker reports to his dad. And then, like, the people under DePodesta answer to him. And there's just like that separation of powers, checks and balances, which are very important in any sort of hierarchy structure. And I think that'll help just streamline the business of it all. Where you don't have Dick Monfort then kicking down the door and like, no, we need to do this and listen to me.
Yeah. And I think that's what we were so worried about
Yeah.
over the last couple of weeks before the DePodesta hire, of the whole thing was starting to feel like Dick was pushing his way back in, undercutting Walker, causing problems in the GM search. And I hope that ended up not being the case with the DePodesta hire, because they said he was the first guy that they interviewed, and we don't know how much truth there is to that. But at the same time, we really there can't be, and Skyler, you've written extensively about this, I've written extensively about this, there can't be this extensive meddling from an owner that does not really know anything about baseball. It can't happen.
Yeah.
But part of that, I think, that works, as we've talked about before, is how DePodesta has pretty good experience with owners that are cheap. Not saying Monfort is cheap, because we've already had the discussion, or are meddlesome, or are self-destructive, or are some combination of those three. And
Yeah.
just that experience is pretty good experience to have when working with the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah. and I think what's something with refreshing is, yeah, we kind of like laughed and questioned about when Walker got promoted. But so far I'm like, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. And Walker has shown like that desire for change to not do what his dad has done. And I think his opening statement at the press conference acknowledged that, like, yeah, this is anything less than progress is unacceptable. No, this has been awful. We have not been good, and we know fans are frustrated. Like, we're frustrated too. But for him to also acknowledge, then, like, we have resources. We have the resources. Now we just need to know where to allocate the dollars and invest in, and where do we put that money in those resources, because we have them. And like,
Yeah.
we know that. As people are like, oh, the Monfort's just cheap. No, they spend money. It's just been very stupidly. 182 million to Chris Bryant has not worked out.
Yeah. I think what's the most refreshing is that acknowledgement of anything less than progress is unacceptable. Because for how many years has it been, oh, we're probably just one or two pieces away. Oh, if such and such isn't hurt, then we would have had a much better season.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been any of that so far this offseason from Walker. It's been, no, the team has been bad and we need to fix it. It's not,
Yeah.
oh man, if Tyro Estrada had played a full season, the Rockies would have been contenders.
Oh, like they were saying in the middle of May.
And we heard a lot less of that once Walker Monfort was promoted. But at the same time, it's like, this team has never been close over the last 7
Yeah.
seasons.
It's been,
And
if Chris Bryant got hurt. Oh, Armand Marquez and Antonio Senzatella were injured. Oh, so-and-so was injured. Everybody deals with injuries. Your team was just badly put together.
The Dodgers regularly have a ton of injuries. They won the World Series twice in a row.
That rotation was mostly injured most of the year.
Everybody gets hurt. Everybody has injuries to deal with. But the thing is, and it's like the Nuggets. Every team has injuries, but you got to have the depth. You've got to have the team built to cope with those injuries.
Yeah. And that kind of something too, as we kind of leapfrog around, and we'll finish up this segment and some finishing thoughts in the third, is what DePodesta talked about, where you need that good balance and blend with how you build a lineup in a roster, where you don't want to when you see a roster full of rookies like the Rockies had last year, it points to just a lack of depth and just how the roster was constructed in the first place. No, you're forcing them up. They feel rushed up out of desperation instead of guys going in and earning their spots and forcing their way onto the roster. Like, there are certainly guys that did that this year. I'd say a Kyle Karros was a guy who kind of did that. And there were some other guys. But largely it was out of desperation because we have nobody else we can put on this roster. And the veterans we have are garbage. Kyle Farmer ain't moving the needle. Much as I liked Farmer, he did not move the needle one bit. So DePodesta, talking about that and the need for veterans, of guys who these young guys can learn from, of what it takes to be a successful big leaguer. Kyle Farmer was not the model example of what it takes to be a successful big leaguer. You need somebody else. Chris Bryant could have been that, except his back just has turned into dust. It's that understanding, I think, from DePodesta too, of that reckoning of there's whatever you guys are doing, it ain't working. It ain't it.
When Blaine Crim is in your top 12 in terms of wins above replacement, and you've got 2 guys in there, your top wins above replacement guys, were traded at the deadline, so didn't play any games for you after the end of July, and another guy in your top 12 didn't play any games for you after May because he got hurt. It shows you, this team used a ton of different players. 52, 54? A lot of different players this year. And none of them really made a difference. Yeah. In fact, some of them were active detriments to the team.
Yeah, and even guys that had good offensive seasons were still a negative impact on the team in some way.
Yeah, Mickey Moniak and Tyler Freeman, lovely offensive seasons, so bad defensively that they are in negatives for wins above replacement. That almost every kid you called up struggled. And it's a detriment. It shows how bad the Rockies have been at team building and player development.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. And you know what? We'll touch on that, of what DePodesta's going to try and do on that stuff and try and improve it when we come back here on Affected by Altitude. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. 2 solid segues, Evan, that you led me right into. So, well done.
I'm the segue master.
But DePodesta, so we've heard about this. It sounds like he's going to get his control. No, he's going to likely hire a GM. They reportedly want one in before the winter meetings in a couple weeks. We'll see what happens there. Also heard that he has talked that Warren Schaefer will be in the mix for the manager role, or they at least want to just give him some sort of role and keep him around as a bench coach. Maybe goes back to being a third base coach, something like that. But they want Warren Schaefer involved because DePodesta is I need a guy that's good with player relationships and just managing that vibe in the clubhouse. And I think Schaefer's earned that, Evan. No, we like Schaefer, and he wouldn't be a bad choice.
No, not
just
at all.
Have as your manager.
And even if he's not the manager, having him still involved in some way to continue to get experience, but also to be a guy who is bought in on the idea of a rebuild and has the ear of his guys in the clubhouse, because that you need someone like that. You need a guy who has the players bought into him in some way, shape, or form in what is going to continue to be a pretty difficult stretch of time for the team.
Yeah. And so that's huge. So still no timetable on either of those. The DePodesta was like, I want to be able to hire like the right person. I don't want to just like hire a person just because, but like to make sure it's a right fit and fits in with the organization and what they want to do and everything. So it's okay to take your time on those two things, but he's going to have to start getting the ball rolling on some other things. And I think the big one, Evan, is big question in everybody's mind is how do you solve pitching at Coors Field and what are you going to do about it? And we'll touch on things that have happened with the front office, but the big thing Evan that he talked about was that his focus really this offseason is probably going to be on pitching, acquiring it via trade. It sounds like they'd even been talking to some free agents. They've been trying already to do that in this past week or something. But yeah, it's going to be the big thing for him, Evan. What can he do to acquire some pitching?
Yeah. And in terms of pitching acquisition, we've heard him discuss, and it's been talked about how the Rockies have a ton of outfielders in their farm system and on the big league team. They have got a glut, and they're maybe not all big league caliber, but there is excess goods there. And there has been talk of DePodesta and this Rockies front office trading some of that depth for pitching, especially starting pitching. But in addition to that, you're also looking at bringing in free agents, and you're also looking at a complete overhaul, basically, of how this team handles pitching. And I think the biggest thing to come from that is the only remaining part of basically the entire player development staff outside of one or two minor league coaches for pitching is Scott Oberg. He's all that's left in terms of the player development coaching. Daryl Scott, gone. And then we had this week it get announced that the Rockies are not bringing back, or they are parting ways with, Doug Linton, who's been the pitching coordinator for this team since 2013. They're parting ways with Flint Wallace, who was recently the pitching coach for the Arizona Fall League Salt River Rafters, a minor and major league pitching coordinator, director of pitching strategies, a guy who seemed like he had a future in this organization, potentially as a pitching coach, and was even bought in on things like biomechanics and analytics. But he's gone. They've also parted ways with several minor league coaches. Most importantly, I think, is Chris Michalak, who was the pitching coach for the AAA Albuquerque Isotopes. The Isotopes, even in terms of being in a very hitter-friendly environment in the Pacific Coast League, really struggled with pitching over the last 3 seasons, where Michalak was the pitching coach down there. You know, bottom 3 in terms of league ERA for the Pacific Coast League. And what this shows me is, one, it does show to me that, especially with parting ways with guys like Doug Linton and Flint Wallace, guys we know that the organization are high on, believe that they had futures here or have been here for a long time. In Linton's case, you know, Linton's been with the organization since 2006, I think, that he has the autonomy to adjust and move on and make changes. And to be fair, we don't know how many, if any, of these parting of ways were mutual, or if it was all on DePodesta. A really good example is the Rockies parted way with the hitting coach for the High Spokane Indians, Trevor Burmeister, but then he announced the same day that he was taking a position with the Red Sox organization. So we have no idea if it was a mutual parting of ways, or if it was Burmeister deciding to leave on his own, or what. But at the very least, it's really important just to point out how much of a shakeup there has been, where Steve Foster, the former director of pitching, was gone at the beginning of last season. He left to take a position with Texas Tech. So we had a bunch of people, but nobody really took over as that director. And now pretty much everybody, except for, you know, you have Edison Laura, who's the Latin American pitching coordinator. You've got what's his name? There's 2 guys in Arizona Complex League whose names I'm not recalling right now, and I apologize. Jerry Sullivan in Low A Fresno, Blaine Beatty in High A Spokane, and Dan Meyer in Double A Hartford. Everybody else is gone except for Scott Oberg, who kind of took on the sort of hybrid pitching strategy, pitching coordinator role with all the mix up. And I think the biggest thing is that all the shakeups on the big league team. Another thing that didn't really get a lot of news attention, but you know who else has left the organization? Is Dustin Garneau, who I thought did a pretty okay job as the bullpen coach last year. But he has left to take a role as a catching coach on Walt Weiss's new staff with the Atlanta Braves. And so the Rockies now have no pitching coaching on the big league team right now. None.
Well,
It's a blank slate.
I'd argue they don't have a coaching staff at all because everybody was really on an interim basis anyway. So
that is fair.
Aside from Ron Gideon, maybe Ron Gideon still has a job.
Ron Gideon is eternal. Ron Gideon is forever.
But yeah, it's showing like that's his biggest thing is figuring out pitching. Like winning games starts with pitching. And yeah, the offense will need a lot of work too, but the pitching needs a ton of work. That's your biggest challenge with the Rockies, because if you can figure out pitching, okay, then you can turn and or work on the hitting. But yeah, Flint Wallace as the pitching coordinator, not working out. Like, yeah, he's been there since 2021. The team has not gotten better pitching wise since then. And a lot of these other ones. So it's time to try something new instead of banging your head against the wall with the same people. Okay, let's turn to somebody new who can help figure this out and bring some new strategies and coordinator to implement a system from top to bottom. This is how we pitch as the Colorado Rockies. This is our philosophy with pitching. Now, I don't want them to become one note like we've heard before, where it's everybody's got to be a ground baller, sinker baller. Like, no, don't go that route. But how you attack hitters, how you approach hitters, how you understand how things work at Coors Field and adapt to that, that's what you need. I don't want a bunch of Eric Cooks out there. I want a variety of people.
And I would like to see, and I know that you don't want to get too heavy on bringing in familiar faces, but there are a couple guys who we've discussed before and have shown interest in those kind of roles that you might want to consider bringing in if you're going clean slate. So Scott Oberg's still there currently. I think he's a great face to have. But then, Adam Ottavino, we talked about when his name got thrown into the hat as a supposed candidate to be the president of baseball operations, is that while that would be a terrible idea, what wouldn't be a bad idea is bringing him in a, more lower level pitching strategy, pitching development kind of role, because he's a very smart guy when it comes to adjustment and mechanics and strategy in terms of pitching. And another name that we've thrown around is Aaron Cook, who one of the Rockies' most successful pitchers at Coors Field. And you don't want to emulate everything he's done, because we don't want to go down that same road of you've got to be a good sinker baller and get ground ball contact. But to have a guy who can come in and say, I have been successful at Coors Field with the Rockies. Here is my input.
Well, Evan, but if you ever read the comments section when somebody posts about the Rockies on, social media or something, people have all the answers there of you just got to get a bunch of ground ballers.
We've tried that.
What?
There is one of the things that Dick Muff was right about. We tried that. We tried that for like 2 decades.
And then they tried it again.
The cookie cutter approach doesn't work. And what we have seen, especially with the Rockies, is what they lag behind more than anybody else in terms of the modern game of baseball is strikeouts.
Mm-hmm.
And strikeouts will always be important when it comes to pitching. And the Rockies rank dead last in strikeouts over the last 4 seasons.
Yeah. And then they have a bunch of walks too. So, but what about maybe there's a Rocky who was really good pitching at Coors Field and just got inducted into the Mexican Baseball Hall of Fame. That was, he had a sub-5 ERA at Coors Field. Like, yeah, that's not great, but all things considered, a really good career at Coors Field in Jorge De La Rosa.
And is still on good terms with the organization, to the point where he insisted in going into the Mexican Baseball Hall of Fame with a Rockies uniform on his plaque. Like, there's a difference between being, you can only hire guys that, are familiar with the Rockies. We've got to be loyal to our guys. And taking input and taking examples from guys who do have the experience. Like, I made a ton of fun of Mark Kisla's column about the head of the front office search, about how he was like, whoever's the PBO has to have experience playing at Coors Field and all that stuff like that. That's very silly to think of. But having the new PBO, Paul DePodesta, bring in and discuss and maybe hire, maybe not even hire, just bring people in consulting
Just pick their
roles.
brains.
Come
Yeah.
in. Hey, Cookie, come in. We're gonna buy you lunch and dinner, and we're gonna have a nice weekend, and we're gonna pick your brain this entire weekend on your thoughts at pitching at Coors Field. And then, all right, come on down, such and
Jorge
such.
De La Rosa. Hey,
DLR, come
Ubaldo
on in.
Jimenez. Yeah, there's a wide berth of players that you can go and no, that was something that Bill Schmidt always talked about, but they would just be these guys that come in for a spring training in camp. But no, you don't have to hire these guys, but pick their brains. No, DePodesta has that opportunity to go out, look at the history of the Rockies, of all the great players. No, he talked about he's been in communication with Matt Holliday about something, or he's talked to him about something. Ooh. But, build those relationships with some of these great players that had success at Coors Field. Okay, what is that you noticed that made you successful with the Rockies? What do you notice what do you wish the Rockies could have done differently while you were playing that you saw somewhere else? Ubaldo Jimenez would be, I wrote about this on Purple Row. He is a perfect foil to what Chase Dolander could be. What do we do? There's the resources, and I think DePodesta, that it's out there.
Yeah.
To help figure out pitching. Believe it or not, there are some good pitchers that have been with the Rockies that have had success with the Rockies.
And it's not just pitchers. You mentioned Matt Holliday. You know what would be a great move by DePodesta would be to try to mend the bridge with Troy Tulowitzki and go, we want you to help us fix the team. Give us your input. Or, who's probably going to be retiring this offseason? Hey, DJ LeMahieu, you just spent a couple very successful seasons with the Yankees, who are regularly one of the best teams in baseball. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, come be our first base coach.
So many resources from this organization's history that I feel like the Rockies have never really capitalized on. And part of it is, the stuff we've mentioned over the last few years, the Coors Field 30th anniversary, the Rockies 30th anniversary, where it seemed like their connections to their past were really lacking. Like, the only thing they really did for the Coors 30th anniversary was have Dante throw out the first pitch.
Ta-da!
That's it. That's all you could muster. Bring in all of these people and not just mend relationships, but then get their input of, look, we know this organization has lost its way and we want your help.
Yeah. You don't have to offer them jobs or anything. Like, just pick their brain.
Yeah.
Invite them over and just talk to them and get that input.
Make them feel welcome. Make them feel wanted.
Yeah.
Don't make them pay for their own hotel room.
It's a deep cut. We won't say who, but if you know, you know.
But honestly, he's right. Like, the Monforts own a massive hotel in downtown Denver across the street from the stadium. You're telling me you couldn't spring for a room there for a guy to come in and visit?
No. I forgot about that. But yeah, there's so much that they can do, and it's a lot of they're in that a clean slate, especially with pitching strategies. Pitching is going to be the focus this offseason, and we'll see what he can do to build it up and try to get a semblance, because you've got maybe like three, at least maybe two to three spots in that rotation you got to fill for 2026, because right now it's Kyle Freeland and Ryan Feltner. For sure.
If Felty is healthy.
Yeah. And so there's like Kyle Freeland, and then maybe Feltner, and then there's like a swat. There's Blaylock, there's Gordon, there's McCade Brown, and then there's Chase Dolander. Okay. Like, there's still spots there's holes you need to fill and build up depth at that position. And then figure out how they can be successful at Coors Field.
Yeah. And if there are guys that are potentials for this rotation that you don't think can be successful at Coors Field, trade them. Like, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to feel nice. Like, if you trade Carson Palmquist, I'm probably going to be sad because I really like Carson Palmquist. But if you go, we're looking at everything he's got, and I just don't think he's going to be able to work with this organization. But another team might be able to do some really good things with him. You send him to a place where he can be successful, and in return, you get something that you think can be successful in part of your rebuild, in part of your restructuring. And it's something that
Mm-hmm.
the Rockies have always struggled with, of this weird fear that if we trade a prospect, if we trade a player, then they're going to do better there than they could with us, and it's going to make us look bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not how it works.
No, it's a
Sometimes,
game. It's a game about gambles.
yeah, sometimes somebody's just not a good fit.
Yeah. Who knows? But interesting stuff and a lot of good conversation, Evan. This has been a fun one. Also, one weird last thing. How weird is it that it pretty much came down to like Dan O'Dowd told the Rockies, like, hey, check out Paul DePodesta and connected him?
It doesn't surprise me.
But it's just like that one. They're like, Pete DePodesta's like, oh, a third party like connected us, but I won't say who. And then other reporters are like, it was
It's
Dan
Dano.
O'Dowd.
Come on.
Like,
What is the main connective tissue there? It's Dano.
yeah.
But I do think there's a possibility that DePodesta could have eventually found his way over here, considering it sounds like he's been wanting to get back to baseball. Like, he had his time in the NFL. He got to do what he wanted to do because, you know, he loved football as a kid, as a teenager. In college, he played football, but realized now baseball is really where he wants to be, and found a way to get back into it. But yeah, it's an interesting situation.
It's like, oh, Dan O'Dowd. Okay.
Why not?
Just weird to see him pop up again. And then I think it was Christian Sias saying that Dick Mumford had also talked to guys like Harold Reynolds and Clint Hurdle, among others, about the front office job. I was like, why Harold Reynolds? Oh, well. Weird search, but DePodesta's the guy, and he's slowly, but again, it comes down to words are just words until there's action, and we're starting to see some of the action. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Now show us more.
Good
Enough of your
start.
talk, Poindexter. We need action.
Come on, nerd.
Mm-hmm. I call it a Frinkahedron.
Glavin.
Anybody see the movie Tron?
Yeah. No. Yes. I mean, yeah.
I
No.
mean, no. But fun stuff, and we'll see what happens. Another interesting. We'll see what happens in a week without interviews and whatnot. What the Rockies start having in motion, and we'll see what we have to talk about next week. And we'll touch on some minor league stuff next week. Congratulate some guys really quickly next week. But until next time, this has been Affected by Altitude. Evan, where can the folks find you?
You can find me over on purplerow.com writing the Monday Rock Piles, and I should be doing at some point this week one last Pebble report to round out the season before the off season really starts. Arizona Fall League is of course now over, so we'll give that a nice little send off and be done with Pebbles for the winter. But main thing is going to be the Monday Rock Piles. You can also find me over on Blue Sky at evanlang27.bsky.social. I would love to hear from you. You can also find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. If it's got podcasts, we're probably on it. There's also the video version of the show over on YouTube, and you can catch us on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the YouTube channel at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop.
Nice. You can find me over on Twitter at Skyler Timmons or over on Blue Sky stimmons13.bsky.social. Find me doing the Wednesday Rock Pals at Purple Row. Our Ranking the Rockies series is still going at Purple Row as well. We're in the 20s. We're almost there, Evan.
We are over halfway there. We're almost at positive wins above replacement.
Well, I count 0 as a positive.
You shouldn't.
It's better than negative. I'd rather have a guy with 0 WAR than a guy with negative WAR.
That is true.
You can't be a negative player if you don't have any WAR. But yeah, we're in the 20s, finally. And guys are at 0 WAR now. So it's nothing but up from now.
After this, things can only get better.
Mm-hmm. What's that? Kyle Karros had 0.0 R WAR? Oh, well. But fun times, and the award show is coming. We're putting together stuff, Evan. So it'll come in the near future, folks. Stay tuned for that. Eventually.
If anything, we should be kind of grateful because this offseason has actually given us stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Instead of having to do the award show super early, like, we actually have things to discuss.
Well, that and, like, it's making us like, oh, we probably have to do an extra episode to do those award shows. Which, hey, if we have to, we'll do that. We'll do it live. I don't know how we do it live because with our new platforms, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. But until next time, I'm Skyler. That's Evan. Hit 'em with it.
Farewell.
Bye-bye. This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.